morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Kendra. I'm an assistant pastor as well as my husband here at the church. It's a pleasure to be here. So today we're going to continue our summer series on the book called The Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry. I highly encourage you to read it. There's also, it's online. You can listen to it if reading is not your thing. So today we're going to be diving into slowing down. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about rest. And this topic has been heavy on my heart for, I would say, about a couple of years now. I think we started to do this series because I had this sit-down conversation with my husband about a month ago. It was just like a late-night chat, and he said I was ministering to his soul, just talking about rest and like what rest looks like and what does slowing down look like and how it's very biblical for us to slow down and rest and not always be in the busy and the hurry. And so that's kind of how we came up with this. So for those who do know me, a lot of you guys do know that I have been in a very busy season for a number of years. I've graduated from several post-secondary schools, including Bible school. I've been working full-time and part-time during those times. And even my undergrad, I was planning a wedding in my final undergrad. And we were trying not to do that, but it just happened that way. So it was a very busy season to the point that I was burnt out. And it's ironic because I went to school for social work, and we talk about compassion fatigue, we talk about burnout, we talk about how to not burn out. But I burnt out. And so I just want to, talk to you about burnout, but also about the importance of slowing down. After I finished my undergrad, and while I was planning a wedding, I still was in the busy season, planning a wedding, moving. My husband was finishing up his studies in California, so after we got married, we had to quickly drive to California so he can finish his studies, and so we had to pack up our life for a year. And that was supposed to be a time of rest for me. I was supposed to not do anything. I still worked part-time for a university online, but it was hard for me to actually rest. And you think I would have all the tools, I would have all the textbook knowledge and stuff on how to rest, how to do self-care, because that's all we talk about is like self-care. And I failed. I failed big time. And so I remember even having conversations with my husband. He's like, why, like if I was resting right now, I'd be doing, and you give me a list of things you'd be doing. I'm like, those sound great, but I just don't know how to rest. And I feel bored. I feel like I need to be doing something because I've always been doing something. It's either work or school or both at the same time. So I was always busy. And then, unfortunately, after my year that I was supposed to rest, I jumped right back into post-secondary school to finish my Bachelor of Social Work. And that was an even more busier schedule than what it was previously. And so I was already burnt out coming into that year. And then I had to do a full-time internship, full-time school, research, case notes, and all of that. So I was even more burnt out than I should have been starting that. And then after I was finished, my husband told me that I need to take at least 6 months off. He's such a generous husband. But he said, take 6 months off and rest. He's like, you're burnt out. You need to take care of yourself. And so I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that. I lasted 2 months. 2 months before I got a job. And that was not smart for me. 2 months into my job, I ended up getting a workplace injury where I broke my nose and got a concussion. And the symptoms I had concussions before, and it was just mild, but the symptoms weren't resolving. And so I was getting burnt out even more. I was getting frustrated and irritable. And during my time of prayer, I just felt like God was releasing me from work. He's like, you don't need to work. You don't need to do anything. So I chatted with my husband. I'm like, I feel like God's telling me to quit my job. And he's like, yeah, I think you should. And so I did. And I've been embracing the second journey of rest. And I think I'm doing better than I did last time. And it's been really good. And so I'm really excited about this topic today. And I'm really excited to talk talk to you about how you can implement rest and also slowing down in your life. So I just want to talk to you about like what is burnout. So first, while I was reading the Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry, this quote jumped out to me. John Mark Comer said, "Our hurry is killing us." But that sounds like a very heavy thing to say. Our hurry is killing us. But being a social worker, it's true. Our hurry is killing us. Doing research and even just looking at all the stats and the rise of mental health illnesses, like we have seen how our busy schedules and us not taking time to rest or slow down has caused us to have more anxiety, depression, insomnia, and the list just goes on. And so our hurry is slowly killing us. I've also heard from my generation, and generations younger than me, that they're burnt out more than the previous generations. And I'm like, why? Why are you guys burnt out? Why am I burnt out? We just started our careers. We just started, we're young families. Like, why are we burnt out already? We shouldn't be. But I truly believe that, a few years ago when the pandemic hit, we had to stop everything. We couldn't hang out with friends, family. We stopped going out doing extracurriculums. Some of us didn't work. So instead of resting, we picked up other things. We picked up new hobbies. We started binge watching TV. We became more involved in social media. We picked up those things. And then when the pandemic ended, we didn't stop those things. We continued juggling those things while going back to our normal life with work and family and events. And so now we're extra busy. We have more things to juggle than what we did before. So what is burnout? WebMD says that burnout is a form of exhaustion caused by constantly feeling swamped. It happens when we experience too much emotional, physical, and mental fatigue for too long. Burnout doesn't just happen with work, it can happen with your daily lives. It can happen with family, it can happen with friends, it can happen with events, it can happen in church. It happens everywhere. So the signs of burnout include, but are not limited to, feeling physically and emotionally exhausted. You might be cynical, so you might lack interest in work or even things that you used to enjoy doing. You feel useless, you are not productive or motivated as you once were. You might feel depressed. You might get irritated easily over small or even big things. You have trouble concentrating and are forgetting things. You struggle with sleep. You might be dealing with headaches, gut problems, high blood pressure. You might pick up bad habits, or you have removed yourself from loved ones and groups that you once enjoyed. So we are not supposed to be running a marathon all the time. We're supposed to rest. We're supposed to take it slow. We're not supposed to be constantly doing something. You're not supposed to always be looking for the next thing to do. And in the Bible, Jesus shows us this. He shows us the importance of slowing down. So I just want to briefly touch on the story of Lazarus. So Lazarus was a really good friend of Jesus, and he was really sick, and Martha and Mary, his sisters, reached out to Jesus saying, hey, you need to come heal our brother. He is sick, and he is dying. Well, Jesus took his time. Lazarus did die, and Jesus knew that Lazarus died, but he didn't rush on over there. He took his time, and then when he got there, he raised Lazarus from the dead. And to most of us, to me even, I would feel like that's an emergency. Like, you need to be here. This is an urgent thing. You need to come. But to Jesus, he took a few days. And sometimes, something I've noticed, so I've traveled to several different places doing ministry trips around the world, and I've noticed that our Western culture does not know how to rest. Our Western culture does not know how to slow down. The European culture has it pretty good, but our culture doesn't. We're a fast-moving culture when we constantly need to be doing something. When I went to France for a month-long ministry trip, I was surprised to find that all of the stores were closed on Sundays. Nothing was opened, only churches. The grocery stores were closed. Everything was closed. And I love that idea because it gave the employees time to rest and slow down. It gave the employees time to go to church. I know that there's several people, even in the Western culture, who would love to come to church, but they can't because of work or something. And so this gave them time to actually connect with God. They gave them time to connect with family and friends, and even pick up new hobbies that they may not have been able to do. So, yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. And I know that we used to do that years ago, where some stores would close and some close still on Sunday. But we need to practice slowing down, I think, in our Western culture. So I do have a few stories. My husband gave me permission to share these. When we first got married, and even still a little bit now, it happened last night, but when we sit down to eat supper, Kevin, he eats so quickly, and that sometimes I question him, like, do you even taste your food? Like, you usually just swallow it, or did you chew it? Or anyways, I asked him, like, why do you do this? Like, you're always sitting there waiting for me to eat, and you look bored. And he said he doesn't know why he does that. He thinks it's just so that he can get on to the next thing quickly. And I'm like, why? Like, this is a good time for us to connect. This is a good time for us to be in fellowship and just slow down. And so after the conversation, he started to slow down while he's eating. He's doing much better. And I think it's safe to say that he enjoys his food more because he can taste it. But yeah, we're able to connect now, and we're able to actually have a conversation and actually talk about our day, how we're feeling, instead of just quickly getting it done and going to the next thing. Another example is like when we go on vacation. I'm an introvert. I love slowly touring around places. I love resorts, though, because you can relax at resorts. Kevin's ideal vacation, I think, would probably be going to, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, looking at structure and, like, touring all the places. That's not my ideal, but anyways, we've compromised. But anyways, for me, I'm okay with having some days off during my vacation and just relaxing, staying inside. Whereas Kevin, he's like, I have to get everything in today. I have to see how many things I can see today so I don't miss out on anything. And that's exhausting for me. I know it fills him up because he's an extrovert, but it's so exhausting for me. I need a vacation from his vacation that he has planned. But yeah, so thankfully we figured that out and we worked it out, and we still have good vacations. Actually, this August, we're actually practicing that. So we're practicing slowing down. Instead of us just going somewhere, we decided to have a staycation and just relax. And so we are going to be practicing that in August. So the book mentioned that as we slow down our bodies, we will slow down our souls as well. Since our body and soul are connected, it is important to take care of our bodies. And the one way to do that is to slow down our life. And Romans 12, verse 1, if you can put that up, Jake. It says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. If we do not take care of our bodies, we are not able to give God the best sacrifice, which is ourselves, our whole selves, not half of ourselves, but our whole selves. We don't want to give him our leftovers. We don't want to place him second. And if we are not taking care of our bodies and we're constantly exhausted, that's what we're kind of doing. So we also, if we're exhausted, we easily become burnt out and we're not our best selves. And so before Kevin and I were married, we were told by several married couples that, and I can tell you this is true, when you're tired and you're having an argument or a conflict, you should not always resolve it before going to bed. You need to have rest. And that's true. I took psychology in university as well, and it's best to get good night rest because your perspective will change in the morning. When you don't have good night rest, you're going to be more irritable, more frustrated. Those emotions are going to become really big emotions, and that situation is going to be bigger than what it actually really is. And by the time you wake up, you're just frustrated with each other, and it's just not good. But if you actually took time to pause, go to sleep, get a good night's rest, wake up and talk about it later, most of the time, your emotions are back to normal. They're not heightened as they were late at night when you're tired. And you're able to actually have a good conversation, and sometimes the situation doesn't even matter to you in the morning. Like, you know what, this is actually silly. This is silly. We don't need to worry about this. And so it's good to have rest. It's good to have a good night's sleep. And we're not supposed to run on empty fumes. And so Romans 6:12-13, it says, "Therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body, so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness." When we are busy and become exhausted or burnt out, we become more vulnerable. So when we're exhausted, temptation still comes. Even when we're not exhausted, we still have temptations in the world, right? But when we're exhausted, our walls and our protection walls, they're down. And we have nothing to protect us from these temptations that come to us because we're exhausted. And it's just easier for us to fall into these temptations. It's easier for us to sin. So I have a story. John mentioned in the book that he was talking to a pastor who led 6 services on a Sunday, and he asked, how do you do that? Like, how do you not get burnt out? How can you run 6 services? And the pastor replied with, it's just like running a marathon. And he just runs a marathon every single week. That's exhausting. And it turns out that didn't work for him, because a couple months later, John found out that this pastor actually had an affair because he was tired, he was exhausted, he was not his whole self. This is a very good example of why we're supposed to slow down. In Matthew 4:1, verse 11 says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, 'If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread.' Jesus answered, 'It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God.' Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. 'If you are the Son of God,' he said, 'throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone.' Jesus answered him, 'It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test.' Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdom of the world and their splendor. 'All this I will give you,' he said, 'if you will bow down and worship me.' Jesus said to him, 'Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only.' Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him." Jesus just spent 40 days and 40 nights alone in the wilderness with God before Satan came to tempt him. Jesus was able to rebuke the temptation because he has a good relationship with God already. He already had that strong foundation. So Jesus showed us it's very important to stay in connection and relationship with God. Because when temptation does arise, we already are filled up, and we already have our minds focused and our hearts focused on God. We're not going to be focusing on that temptation. We can just tell it to go because we already have our alignment, our hearts aligned with God and our minds aligned with God. So John Mark Comer said in his book, "We are embodied creatures, whole people, our minds are the portals of our whole persons. So how we think has all sorts of ramifications for how we experience life with God. But the mind is not the only portal." So what we give our attention to is kind of what we become. I don't know, parents, if you've noticed your kids start to acting like their friend group. They might be hanging out with the wrong friend group, and you've noticed, like, oh, you changed clothes. Oh, you're starting to act different. Okay, I get more attitude from you, and like you notice that the way who they hang out with is the way they start acting. Like, and it goes for both good and bad things, and it's the same for us. Like, what we give our attention to is how we're going to be acting. If we give our attention to positive things, we'll be more positive. If we're going to give our attention to negative things, we'll become more negative. Mark 4:35, verse 41, says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with them. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this?' Even the wind and the waves obeyed him." So Jesus just finished a busy day teaching, and he got on the boat with his disciples, and he rested, he slept. When the storm came on upon the boat, the disciples were scared. They saw this huge storm, this noise that's going on in the world, and they were not able to focus on God's presence. Instead, they focused on this storm, and they were not at rest. And it just, when I was reading this, I'm like, wow, they were with Jesus on this boat, and they could not focus on God. They could not focus on God's presence. God's presence was right there, but all they could see is the storm. And it happens a lot to us in our daily lives too. Like sometimes we have storms going on, noise going on inside of our minds that's racing all the time, and we're not able to focus on God. And sometimes we ask, like, God, where are you? Well, God's right there. But the question you need to ask yourself is, like, where's your focus? Are you focusing on the storm, or are you focusing on God? Because God's right there. And so it just baffled me. I'm like, wow, like, these disciples are in God's presence on this boat, in this storm, but they didn't see him. They didn't see and feel his presence, his peace through that storm. It's just the same. So Kevin and I, we have this huge orange cat who thinks he's tough, but he's really not. Because when a storm comes through, even a loud noise happens, he is the first to run and hide. And the only way he will come out of his hiding place is if the storm stops, or we can somehow convince him to come out of his hiding place. And I was just thinking about that. It's kind of like, if only he knew that he was safe inside, that the storm's outside, he's inside, he's safe. And if only he knew, like, his two owners are walking around the house, we're fine, but he's still hiding. He's like, oh, it's not safe. And it's the same with us, with God. Like, Jesus was on a boat. He was sleeping. He was resting. He was like, this is safe. This is fine. But the disciples were hiding from the storm. They were scared of the storm. And with us, like with God, sometimes we hide. And God's saying, it's safe. It's fine. Like, come out. You're fine. But we still say, like, no, it's not safe. We're hiding. Like, this is scary. But if we only focused on God, we wouldn't have to hide. It's safe. So every single thing we give access to our minds, we allow to affect our souls. Our time is our life, and our attention is the doorway to our hearts. So if we can slow down both our bodies and minds, we are able to slow down our souls to a pace that we can always be in communion with God. I would love to always be in communion with God, to always be in a relationship, and whenever something comes, like a storm comes, not focus on it, just focus on God. I would love that. I'm not there yet. I have a lot to work on still, but it would be awesome if we could just learn how to slow down our minds, slow down our thinking, so that we don't have to always focus on that storm. We can instead just turn, like, oh, there's a storm coming, and you just, like, focus on God instead. And then you'll always be in a relationship with him. So when I was talking about our Western culture, something I've also noticed was that we're always looking for the next thing to do, whether that's the next series on Netflix, next game to play. But sometimes even in our Christian culture, it's the next devotion. What's the next devotion to do? And, like, you're always thinking of the next thing. Devotions are great. I love devotions. But sometimes we need to learn how to just sit still in the presence of God and ask him what he wants us to do. Maybe he just wants you to sit still. Maybe he wants you to go open your Bible to a certain chapter. But we don't always have to be looking for the next thing to do. If you go to the hospital or somewhere where you are forced to wait, if you look around the room, you'll see most people on their phones trying to stay busy because they don't know what to do. They're uncomfortable in that stillness. They're uncomfortable just resting. So did you know that every time you use your phone, your brain receives a dopamine hit? Especially when you get likes on your photos, or even when people post a comment on something you posted. So what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's also known as a chemical messenger that helps to send messages between 4 major pathways in the brain. It is made within our bodies, and it plays a large role in how we feel pleasure. There are several ways our bodies can make dopamine. So God created dopamine for us. He wants us to feel pleasure, but there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways to receive it. So healthy ways is through exercise, eating protein, getting enough sleep. I would ask how many get enough sleep, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. So reducing the intake of saturated fat consumption, being out in nature, getting some sunlight. And then there are several other unhealthy ways to receive dopamine, and that's using smartphones, social media, drugs and alcohol, and junk food. They're all unhealthy ways to get a dopamine hit. I worked at a youth addictions program last year for my internship, and a lot of those youth, they had a lot of addictions, but most of the youth started with their social media or their cell phones. And before they would come, we told them to put their cell phones away so they couldn't go on them and stuff. But I was really shocked to see that a lot of these bigger addictions started with something small. So the problem with unhealthy dopamine boosts is that it's temporary, and it leads to a letdown. So with unhealthy repeated dopamine boosts, your brain will start to adapt by shrinking dopamine receptors. And then your body will start to slow down in producing the healthy and natural dopamine, which then can lead to depression, anxiety, insomnia, irritability, and unhealthy cravings. So God created this dopamine. It's a healthy thing for us to use, but there's healthy ways to get it. And it's through nature. And even through nature, we learn how to connect with God. Through exercise, we learn how to take care of our bodies. Our bodies is the temple, and we need to take care of our bodies. And so these are healthy ways, and these healthy ways connect us to God. So John, from the book, he said that the CEO of Netflix was asked if there was competition from Amazon Prime or other streaming services, and he said, no, the only competition Netflix has is sleep. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. The only competition Amazon has is sleep. Wow. We have control over that. We can turn off the remote. We can walk away. We can go to bed. We can stop that competition. Sleep should not be a competition. Sleep should be first. Rest should be first. Slowing down should be first. I was, shocked to hear that. Before I was married, I would always spend my time with God before I went to bed. Now I have to change when I spend time with God, but it would look very different for most people. Like, I would still read my Bible, I would still pray, but after I was done praying and all of that, I would just take time to spend with God. I would sit in my room, the lights would be out, and I would just sit there. Sometimes I would ask him a question. Sometimes he would respond. Sometimes he wouldn't respond. But I just sat there in his presence. I really felt his presence. And I truly believe that's where my connection and my relationship with God grew the most, is just, I'm like, hey, God, I'm here. And just waited. And I highly recommend for you to do that. If you don't already just sit still with God in his presence, I highly recommend you try. I know it's not going to be easy at first, but maybe try for 2 minutes. Maybe try for 3. Put your phone away. Don't have an agenda. Just sit there and ask God, what do you want to do right now? Maybe he just wants you to rest in his presence. Maybe he wants you to soak. But learn to actually bring God into your devotion. Instead of always having an agenda, ask God, what do you want to do? Our Western culture has a hard time just sitting still and waiting. So Psalm 46, verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." This verse doesn't say, have an agenda. It doesn't say, be in a hurry. It doesn't say, worry or fear. It says, be still and know that I am God. So that's even in our storms, even when circumstances happen, even in our busy season, we can still be still. You can still be busy, but be still and also slow down. Yeah. There might be situations that come up, and your first reaction is to worry about it and constantly think about it. But this can eat up your mental and physical energy. I am bad for that. You can ask my husband. Sometimes something comes, so I'm speaking to myself more than anything, but sometimes something happens and I'm just constantly replaying it in my head. I'm like, or if I had a conversation, I'm like, oh, did I say that right, or whatever, and it bugs me. And then I'm exhausted, and I just replay it, and it's just a negative cycle. And instead of focusing my focus on God and having peace, I'm now physically and mentally exhausted. Matthew 11:28, verse 30 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We can exchange our burdens with God for rest. That sounds great to me. We don't have to hold on to these burdens. He knows what we're going through. He knows the storms. He knows the situations. He knows it all. But he wants to give us rest in those situations. He wants to give us rest in those circumstances. Why? Because he loves us, but also because he wants to be in connection with us. He wants to be in a relationship with us. And we can't be in connection and relationship with him when we have other things in front of us that are blocking that connection. So I'm just going to give you a few pointers of how you can practice slowing down. So you can use prayer and scripture at the start of your day to set your mood. Instead of going to your phone, instead of going to the news or social media, use prayer, use scripture. Start your day right. Spend time with God in God's presence. Don't have an agenda. Let him decide what to do. Be fully present. This is a really big one. Be fully present with your family. That's very important. Be fully present with your friends, with work, with things that you enjoy doing. Go for a nature walk. Be fully present in that nature walk. Slow down your body by forcing yourself to move slower. Go for a slow walk instead of a fast walk. Maybe go for a slower drive instead of trying to speed to the next location. Journal or process your life with God. Journaling is a good way to slow down, and it's a good way to actually express how you're feeling. And maybe stop and pause and ask God, what do you want to say to me? And write those things down. You can do two-way journaling. That's a great way to practice hearing God's voice, because he's always speaking to us. We just need to learn how to slow down our minds so that we can hear him. Practice mindfulness. So focus on your breathing. You can close your eyes and breathe in and breathe out. You can imagine breathing in the Holy Spirit and breathing in peace while you exhale the negative situations from your day. One thing that we do in social work, I love this tool, and I told many people how to, well, I tell people many people how to use this tool, but what we do to tell if we have stress or to relieve stress in our body, we get them to close their eyes. And you work from your toes all the way up to your eyes, and you just squeeze each part of your body, and then hold it for 20 seconds and then relax. You'd be surprised of how much tension you're actually holding in your body. I was surprised when I did it. I'm like, wow, I knew my shoulders held tension, but I didn't know my eyes and my jaws. Like, I held a lot of tension and stress We don't need to hold that. And so, focus on your body. Know your body. Are you feeling anxious? Why are you feeling anxious? Do you need to give up something? Do you need to maybe not go out with friends on Friday night? Maybe you don't need to go to that soccer game. Is there something that you can cut out of your schedule? Meditate on Scripture. So fill your mind with Scripture and truth. Take time to listening to God. I think this is a very important thing. There's so much good stuff in the Bible that we can use to focus our minds and our hearts back onto God, to slow ourselves down, slow our thoughts down. And Scripture is a really good thing to use. It's a great tool. Get rid of your agenda or change something up. So Kevin and I, we decided instead of this year going away for vacation, we decided to actually pull from our vacation funds and get a robot vacuum. Because being pregnant, I get really tired to even sweep and mop the floor, but let alone do other housework stuff. And so I just asked Kevin, hey, this would be a great idea. This would be a vacation every single week for me if this just got taken care of. And so our vacuum does my floors every single week. Actually, it does it twice a day because we have a cat. But it works. I have more time, and I don't feel rushed or hurried. So I changed something up in my schedule. Force yourself to wait without using a phone. Put those phones away. Have a conversation with somebody, with a stranger. Great way to bring them to church. Great way to share the gospel. Have a conversation instead of being stuck to your phone. Limit phone and screen time. Don't use your phone in the morning. Maybe do your devotions first. Go have breakfast first. Do an exercise first. Go for a walk. And maybe pick up your phone in the afternoon instead. Put your phone to bed. Make it have a bedtime. Put it to bed before, 2 hours before you need to go to bed. And this is a great way. I've talked to a friend years ago. She was struggling with some stuff, and her phone was a big problem. And so I told her, I'm like, put your phone away. You don't need to have your phone. Put it in a different room. Let it not be a temptation. We have control over that. We can control that. So put away your phone. Have good boundaries. So one of my favorite pastors, he used to be at Bethel. Now he's affiliated with Bethel, but his name's Danny Silk. While I was at Bethel doing ministry school, he taught in my classes, and he taught about boundaries. And I love his perspective on boundaries. Here's a quick story. So he was a pastor of a really big church, and people constantly needed his attention. But he also had a young family, and he prioritized his family, which is very healthy. Anyways, there is this couple that called him late at night, demanding his attention, saying that, hey, my wife's just walked out on me. My marriage is falling apart. I need you to come here now. And Danny Silk was like, well, your emergency is not my urgency. And I think we need to hold on to that sometimes. Some people's emergency is not our urgency. It might be an emergency for them, but it may not be an urgent thing. Unless if they're dying or there's a funeral or something like that, then yes, that's an emergency that we need to take care of. But sometimes, Danny Silk asked this guy, oh, how long has your marriage been falling apart? He said, a while. Well, why didn't you come to me before she walked out? Why are you coming to me now? This guy had several years to come to Danny and ask for help. He chose the last minute for him to come help. That's not Danny's fault. And so sometimes we need to think when people ask us to come help, it's great to help people, but it's great to have boundaries. And sometimes we need to is this an immediate thing? No. I think I can probably use this story. Yesterday, my sister was going to call me, but she didn't want to bug me because we were sleeping in, and her youngest was sick. Anyways, I talked to her on the phone later. Her one girl was, everything turned out to be fine, but she she's like, I said you could have called me. Like, if you text me or if you message me, I won't hear it because I'm sleeping. My phone's off. Not off, but it's on silent. But if you call me, it would go through, which is a healthy boundary that I set for myself. But she said, oh, no, I didn't want to wake you up. It's fine. If it was urgent, I would have called you. I'm like, okay, great. She's like, would you have been okay with it? I'm like, of course, that's an emergency. Your daughter's sick, you needed help. To me, I would have went and helped right away. But if you called me up to wake me up to go to a yard sale, then that's not something I'd be happy with. So know the limits, know the boundaries. It's really good to have those. I just want you to turn to your neighbor and tell them no. Now I want you to turn to your other neighbor and say, that's okay. So in our culture, I really feel like sometimes we have a hard time saying no, and sometimes we have a hard time receiving no. And I think that's very important. If we're going to slow down our life and people keep asking you to do things, you're going to have to say no. And even if they're not okay with receiving no, that's okay. You said no. No means no. And we need to be okay with receiving no as well. And the last one, stop procrastinating. I'm not a procrastinator. I know sometimes it works for some people, but every time in university when I watch people trying to finish up their assignment or their essay or whatever, they would procrastinate until the last minute, and then the last minute they would hit submit, but they were so stressed and anxious, and they burnt out more. Stop procrastinating. Get it done ahead of time. If you can't get it done ahead of time, well, then maybe you need to rearrange your schedule. See what can be dropped. And so these are just some tips that you can take if you feel like you are having a busy schedule and you need to slow down your life. But I do feel that there are some people here that might be going through something right now, and it's really hard for you to focus on God. It's really hard for you to slow down your thoughts because all you're thinking about is that situation. And if that's you, I won't get you to put your hand up or anything, but you can come to the front. So as the worship team comes up, you can come to the front for prayer. But also, I would like to pray for you. And if that's not you, then maybe you need to ask God, what can I give up? Is there something in my schedule that I don't need to do? If you're feeling too busy. So we can bow our heads. We can pray as Sharon starts playing. But if you do need prayer afterwards, please come to the front. We have people that would love to pray for you. So, Father, I just thank you for slowing down. I thank you for rest, and I thank you that you have demonstrated it so well, Father. I just pray for those who are having a hard time with focusing on you, with slowing down their thoughts, Father. I just ask that you just come and you show them where you are in this very moment, Father. I pray that you draw their attention back to you, Father. Father, I pray that you give them peace where there is no peace. I pray that you give them hope where there is no hope, Father. Father, I just thank you that you are a good God, that you love us, and that you want us to take care of ourselves, Father. I pray that you continue to help show us how we can take care of ourselves so that we can give you more of ourselves, Father. Father, thank you for today. I thank you for your goodness. Amen.